On part 4.2.1, multiplying fractions. Remember, you can write number 4 can be written as a fraction. How do I write a whole number as a fraction? Well, every whole number can have a denominator. So what would the denominator be? So if I wanted to write 4 as a fraction, I would just put it over 1. I would have a denominator of 1. That's because 4 divided by 1 is 4. So anytime you have a whole number and you write it as a fraction, just put it over 1. Let's look at this problem. It says work with your group. We're going to go ahead and do it on our own. You want to serve lemonade to 20 people. Each glass holds 3/4 of a cup. How many cups of lemonade do you need? Well, I want to give each person 3/4 of a cup. So that means I'm going to take my 20 people and multiply it by 3/4. If you take 20 times 3/4, remember, we can put that whole number over 1. Now I have a fraction times a fraction, and we already learned numerator times numerator, denominator times denominator. So that would give me 60 over 4. Do not forget to always simplify. How many times does 4 go into 60? Well, the answer is 15. So you would need 15 cups to serve 20 people. The next one said you grew 12 pounds of peas. You give some away, keeping 2/3 of the peas for yourself. How many pounds do you have left? Well, if I start out with 12, I would need to multiply it by the 2/3. I want to know what 2/3 of 12 is. Again, put the whole number over 1 to make it a fraction times a fraction. Then top times top, bottom times bottom gives me 24 over 3, which equals 8. Because 24 divided by 3 is 8. So I would have 8 pounds. And you could abbreviate it with a P. You could write LBS. That also means pounds. However you would like to abbreviate that, as long as you can explain it. Now, the equations for these problems. Well, we kind of already wrote the equations up here. So if I wanted to do some equations, how could I write these multiplication problems? Well, looking at the bottom here, I could write, for the first one, I could say, well, it's 3/4. So 3/4 times what could give me 20? So I would go ahead and I could rewrite it, or I could just write it the same way that I did. 20 over 1 times 3/4 equals 15 cups. And I'm going to go ahead and write that out like that since we already did the work. For the second one, if I wanted to do it a little different, I could say, well, 2/3 times what? So I could use a variable. B would give me the 12 pounds. And then I could find out that 2/3 times 8 would give me that information. That's just another way to write the equation. Let's continue with multiplying in whole numbers. Here, at this time, we have a recipe. We have a recipe here that serves 4 people. If I wanted to serve 12 people, how many times would I have to multiply that recipe, or how many times would I need to duplicate it? I would need to duplicate it 3 times, because 3 times 4 gives me 12. So I would need to triple the recipe. So in order to triple the recipes, I would have to triple all the ingredients. So that means for the sugar, I would have to take the 3/4 cup and multiply it by 3. Remember, put the whole number over 1. That gives me 9 over 4, because top times top, bottom times bottom. And then remember to simplify. So in this case, it would be 2 groups of 4, and I would have 1/4 left over. Salt would be the same thing. Taking the amount of salt that I have 1/2 of a teaspoon. I need to triple it times 3, put that whole number over 1, and then go ahead and solve. 1 times 3 is 3, 2 times 1 is 2, and simplify to get 1 1/2. Remember, I'm tripling it. For the eggs, I have 2 eggs, so this would just be 2 times 3, because I would need to triple it to know that I would need 6 eggs. Go ahead and try flour and vanilla. Come back and check your work. All right, let's see what you got. I wrote it down here at the bottom just because I needed a little more space. Here's what I've gotten for flour and vanilla. You should end up with 7 1/2 for the flour and 4 1/2 for the vanilla. If you didn't, take a look and see where you made your mistake. Now let's find the product using different methods. Well, the first thing we just did was multiplying a fraction by a whole number. Put the whole number over 1 and multiply. Well, 1 times 20 is 20. 4 times 1 is 4. 20 divided by 4 is 5. That's one way of doing it. For B, it's 20 times a half. Well, what is half of 20? You could do that in your head and see that the answer is 10. If not, go ahead and work it out. 20 times 3/4. Well, we need to know what 3/4 of 20 is. Again, we can go ahead and put the whole number over 1 and multiply this out. So this would come up with 60 over 4. Well, what is 60 divided by 4? Or how many groups of 4 can you take out of 60? The answer is 15. And the last one for D is 3 over 2 times 20. Well, that's really 1 1/2 times. I could do it the same way. Put the fraction over 1. 3 times 20 is 60. 2 times 1 is 2, which to give me 30. Or you could have done in your head 1 full 20 and half of another. So here are two methods you could have used to do this. One is I could have multiplied a fraction by a whole number, or I could have used my division rules that I know about 1/4 and 1/2 to do some of this in my head. Either way is fine to do when you're working with 4s and halves. Again, here is our rule for multiplying a fraction by a whole number. Put the whole number over 1 and multiply as normal. And don't forget to simplify. So 6 times 2/3 would be written as 6 over 1 times 2/3 to give you 12 over 3 and simplified to 4. Let's look at some more. Here are some more. You will probably find the same multiplication expressions are easy to simplify with Hannah's method, and others are easier with Jamal's method. For each express. That's talking about like we did before, where we could use the half and the fourth, or we could just multiply them out, whichever method we feel would be the easiest. I'm going to go ahead and just work on them as normal and solve them. So I'm going to put 7 over 1. It's the whole number and multiply. 7 times 5 is 35. 1 times 14 is 14. And then simplify. How many groups of 14 can I take out of 35? I can take 2 whole groups. That gives me 28. And how many do I have left? Well, I have 7 out of the 14. But again, remember, always ask yourself, can I go any further on my simplification? And I can. I can simplify 7 over 14 to 1/2. So 2 1/2. 3/4 times 8. Again, put that whole number over 1. 3 times 8 is 24. 4 times 1 is 4. And remember, ask yourself, can I simplify this? Yep, 24 divided by 4. Or how many groups of 4 can I take out of 24? The answer is 6. Try the next two. Come back and check your work. All right, let's see how you did. Here is what I got for those two answers. Go ahead and check to see if you got the same thing. If not, try to see where you made your mistakes. Here is some more information, another method. Okay, here we have another recipe. One person calls for a cocoa recipe for one person calls for 3/4 cup of milk. Tell how much milk we're going to need if we want to make it for more people. Again, you're just multiplying here. 3/4 cup per person, so how much for 3? You would do 3/4 times 3. Be sure to put it over 1, so you have a fraction times a fraction. 3 times 3 is 9. 4 times 1 is 4. And then simplify. How many groups of 4 can you take out of 9? 2. And you have 1/4 left over. If I had 5 people, I use the same method. 3/4 cup per person times 5 people. Put it over 1. Here we go. 3 times 5 is 15. 4 times 1 is 4. And then simplify. How many groups of 4 can you take out of 15? That would be 3 whole groups, which is 12. I have 3 left over, 3/4. Try the next two. Try for 6 people and 8 people. Come back and check your work. Here we go. Here's what you should have gotten. As you notice, the more people I have, the more cups of milk that I would need. That makes sense. If you made a mistake, check it and see what you can do. Here's another way of looking at it. Here we talk about money. With fudge is $6 per pound. Remember, there's 16 ounces in 1 pound. How do we figure out how much this is going to cost us? Well, the method remains the same. We want to buy 3/4 of a pound. Well, I'm going to take my 3/4 times my $6 per pound, put it over 1, and multiply. 3 times 6 is 18 over 4. How many groups of 4 can you take out of 18? Well, I can take 4 groups. 4 times 4 is 16. I have 2 out of 4 left. I can simplify that to 4.5. That really means it's going to cost me $4.50. $4.50. Because remember, we're talking about money here, and we want to know how much it's going to cost. The next one's a little different. It's in ounces, so it's in 8 ounces. Well, we know that there's 16 ounces in a pound, so we're going to have 8 out of the 16 ounces. How much does that cost if each is $6 for 1 pound? Again, doing the same work, putting it over 1 and multiplying. 8 times 6 is 48. 16 times 1 is 16. And then simplify. How many groups of 16 can you take out of 48? And in this case, the answer is 3. So if we came out with 3 exactly, that means that it would cost $3. And remember, 8 is half of 16, so half of $6 is $3, so that does make sense. Try the next two on your own, come back and check them. Here we go. Again, taking what we have in ounces, putting it over 16 if we have ounces, and coming up with $1.50. Remember, when we get the answer, we have to change it to money. So 1 1/2 is $1.50. 1 1/2 pounds, well, we know it's $6 a pound. We could still do the math and change it to an improper fraction, or you might have been able to do that one in your head to come up with $9. Here's the next one. Again, if fabric costs $2 per yard, what is the length? Well, first of all, we got to figure out a little math. In 1 foot, there are 12 inches. In 1 yard, there's 3 feet, which means that there's 36 inches. We're going to need that measurement to help us out a little bit. The first one says I need to buy 2/3 of a yard. I'm going to take 2/3 and multiply it by $2. Again, put it over 1. That's going to give me 4/3. Well, to simplify, I end up with 1 1/3. Well, about how much money, excuse me, I put a half there. How much money is 1 1/3? Well, 1/3 of $1 is about 33 cents. So we're going to say that A, I'm going to write it down here, is going to cost me $1.33 for 2/3 of a yard. What if I bought 1 1/2 foot? Well, that one's a little more difficult because I have to think about that there are 3 feet in 1 yard. So I'm buying 1 1/2 of a foot. So I'm buying half a yard, basically. So how much would half a yard cost me? Well, that one I can kind of do in my head. That's going to be $1. If I couldn't, I could write that out as 1 1/2 times the $2 to see what I would come up with. But remember, that's in feet and our money is in yards, so we have to do a little figuring. Go ahead and see if you could do the next two. Come on back and check it. While you're working, I'll go ahead and write them out for you just to see if we come up with the same answer, or at least set it up, because C is in inches and that's a little more difficult. Welcome back. I got 8 out of 36. And the reason I put that over 36 is because there's 36 inches in 1 yard, and I'm multiplying by $2 per yard. So I have to kind of keep my stuff equal so I know what I'm doing. Again, you can put that over 1. So we're going to go ahead and see what we get for this. Well, if I multiply across, I get 16 over 36, which is going to go ahead and equal about what? What can I divide them both by? Well, looking at 16 and 36, I think 4 goes into both of those. So if I divide them by 4, I'm going to get 4/9. How much is 4/9 of a dollar? Basically, change it to a decimal. Remember, top divided by bottom. That's going to equal 0.44. So about 44 cents. That's what it would cost me for 8 inches. The last one there for 1 3/4 yards. Remember, 1 yard was $2, so I know I have to get more than $2. I can change this to an improper fraction, which would give me 7 over 4 times the $2. Remember, put that whole number over 1. So 2 over 1 gives me 14 over 4. And if I simplify, that comes out to be 3 1/2. So I'm going to buy 3.5 yards. Well, it's $2 per yard, so 3 yards would be 6, and half a yard's $1. So that's going to end up with $7. Got to kind of think a little bit of what we're asking for these ones. Hope this find this simple. If not, ask questions.